And when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
And if we're talking tight ends and we're going into round 2, maybe round 3, give me Ian Thomas, please. Let's just do the damn thing.
Just based on giving his overall ability. Again, I like his arm. I think he can make every throw.
The pick at number 12 is in.
We are back, Cover One, the Draft Podcast. I'm Russell Brown. With me, my good man, CP Christian Page. Brother, how have we been?
Man, it's been a while, but I've been good. Happy Friday, Russ.
Yes, happy Friday. We both have been tied down away from our computers and our typical podcast self every week, but big things happening in our personal lives. I'm not going to go into them today or anything like that, but you've got some exciting things happening on your end. I've obviously got things going on my end, so that's what's taking up some time, but we're back doing some draft stuff and to kind of close out August with the podcast, and then we'll get back to it next week as well to do some NFL training camp stuff, and it's a lot of fun. But there's been so much uncertainty with this upcoming college football season where I think we've both kind of just been waiting in the wings to see exactly what happens. And I think we are now starting to get somewhat of an idea of what kind of season we could potentially see. I mean, I think we know the ACC and the SEC, they are 100% going to try to make this season happen. Do you think that's not going to happen? Do you think they're going to play? I think they're going to play.
Yeah, I think so too. And of course, a month away from the season now, it's easy to say, well, they have all the right protocols in. And of course, after week 1, there may be an outbreak. There may be liabilities. Who knows? But I think right now, just with the information we have, I feel pretty confident that they've taken the right measures to go forward just concerning the SEC and ACC. It seems like, they've taken the right measures to make sure that this thing's at least going to start. Now, whether it finishes, that may be a different story, a different question. But right now, I feel pretty confident that they'll start on time and at least get, I'll say, 3/4 done with the season, and then we'll reevaluate when that point comes.
Absolutely. Would they get an entire 10-game season in? I don't know. Do I think 8 games? I think that's a much stronger possibility than anything else. And that brings us obviously to the Big 12. I think we both are in agreement there to add them into the mix, that they should be playing this fall as well. But the two conferences that we have so much uncertainty on, the Big 10 and the Pac-12. The Pac-12 has already called it, saying they're not going to play this fall. There's been no mention of them possibly coming back and playing. But the Big 10, it all happened today. It all changed around noon today. A few weeks ago, they said that they're canceling the season. They're not going to play when all signs pointed that the Big 10 was going to play. And then today, it's now they're considering a schedule that would start the season around Thanksgiving. And this would push them obviously further back than most teams. And they would probably have to play and then get right into some type of bowl or championship game. There wouldn't be like a few-week break like we normally see. Do we think in November we will see the Big Ten play? I think I'll hear your answer, but I know what I'm going to say. So go ahead.
That's a long time to wait. We're projecting the ACC, SEC, and I guess the Big 12 to start pretty much a month from today or a month from tomorrow. But, assuming something all the way to Thanksgiving, it's hard to gauge. But with the roller coaster ride we've had with the new Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren, it's hard to really judge or gauge where this direction of this conference is going. Mm-hmm. And to me, let's just play, and I know we'll get your answer here in just a second, but let's just say they do have the season at the end of November. There's only a certain amount of weeks just depending on what other postseason there's going to be in college football this year. Is the Big Ten even going to be eligible to play in that, because their season may, stretch over that playoff period? So it'll just be definitely interesting to see just how that phenomenon takes place. But right now, I guess just based on how it's been said that they're going to play, but November is just a long way to go. And just based on, the history, the recent history we've had from the Big Ten, it's hard to really say that they're really going to do anything because it seems like they changed their mind just in a matter of days.
That is accurate. And this was reported by Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports, and then Bruce Feldman of The Athletic followed up with that as well. But I do believe the Big Ten will play in November. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the week of Thanksgiving. I think it could be maybe a week or two even before that. But I think that they're going to push for Big Ten football, and I think they're going to try to do it simply for the fact of how much criticism they got for pulling the plug right away. And it was simply for the fact that they had this opportunity to play. They all signs pointed that they were going to play, and then they came out, voted and everything, and they canceled it and shut it down. And it was and like even some coaches and personnel people within certain universities were even coming out and saying from every conference that we were in and every meeting that we were in, every call, it was pointing that the Big Ten was going to happen this year. We were going to get Big Ten football, and now we're not getting it. So I think this is something that is a step in the right direction. They are obviously going to spend probably the next week or two to kind of finalize some details. And then I think by the time we get into the first week of the SEC and the ACC, I think we could have a strong decision that, yes, they will have a schedule put in place and everything like that. I mean, they might have the answer sooner rather than later, but I'm going to say by the time we get to SEC and ACC football every single week here in a couple of weeks, I think we'll have a for sure answer, and I think that answer will be yes on the Big Ten. Now, again, I don't know, and I'm with you, I don't know how this scheduling is going to go, but I do believe it's going to be a very good schedule for the teams that I think can compete. I think for like Ohio State that can come in and compete. I think even Michigan, Penn State, even though they've lost some guys, I think that they could come in and they could compete. And I think it'll be fun. And I think it's going to be good for the simple fact that as the season for ACC and SEC and Big 12 football start to wind down, I think you'll get even more football for the Big Ten. So it really could work out. I don't know how they're going to play these games because it gets cold as hell up here. But, I mean, I'm okay with it. But I just don't know how it's going to all play out. But I'm excited. That moves us, though, away from the Big Ten into the opt-outs. We've had quite a few. And you put together a great piece, which, of course, you guys can find over at cover1.net. Download the Cover One app for free, and you can get those push notifications. CP put together this opt-out type of tracker for the players that wanted to go into the NFL draft and all that stuff. And you did a phenomenal job on it. Give us maybe a brief synopsis on it, and let's just jump into some of these names that have opted out and the impact that it's going to have on them, their university, but ultimately their draft stock for the 2021 draft.
Sure. So it was a week ago from today, last Friday morning, August 21st. 11 players at that point had declared for the 2021 NFL draft. So they're opting out of the 2020 season and go ahead and go through the agent process and prepare for next year's draft. And again, I think, it was 11 last week, and I'm pretty sure nobody has entered their name in the mix so far. I know two guys, Ole Miss center Eli Johnson, Oklahoma running back Kennedy Brooks. They have opted out of the season, but they have not necessarily talked about their intentions to enter the draft. So I did not include them in this list. But of the 11 players, I'll just run through them real quick, and then we can touch on some individuals. Rashad Bateman, the wide receiver out of Minnesota. Caleb Farley, the cornerback out of Virginia Tech. Warren Jackson, wide receiver, Colorado State. Jalen Mayfield, offensive tackle, Michigan. Rondell Moore, wide receiver, Purdue. Micah Parsons, linebacker, Penn State. Gregory Russo, defensive end, Miami. Sage Surratt, wide receiver, Wake Forest. Jay Tafule, out of defensive tackle out of USC. And then Jalen Twyman, defensive tackle out of Pittsburgh. And then Kerry Vincent Jr. is the defensive back, safety / cornerback of LSU. So all 11 guys, maybe with the exception of a couple, all have some kind of first-round buzz surrounding them. I'll throw this back to you. Any of those names stand out? I know there's quite a few that you definitely have at the top of your list as far as preseason rankings go.
Yeah, I'll start with Greg Russo out of Miami, Florida. And I don't know if we've necessarily talked a ton about him in detail. And I was on ACC radio for Sirius XM this past week, and as you were on WGR over in Buffalo, and I'm sure we had similar questions, especially when it comes to this opt-out tractor. But with Russo, he's a player that is incredibly versatile, and he's very flexible, and he's got a very fluid lower body. I love the way that Miami utilized him all over the line of scrimmage, whether it was in an odd man front or even in an even man front. And when they got into passing downs and it was 3rd and 12, 3rd and 15, they'd get into an odd man front, they drop into their dime defense, and Russo's playing as a nose, and he's creating pressure and generating a ton of it. And he had 15 and a half sacks in 2019. He had 19 and a half tackles for loss. Clearly one of the best players in the ACC, especially from the defensive side of the football. I think he's got to become more consistent with his pass rush plan overall. I think he needs to develop really just a plan of attack, not just more consistent, but it needs to extend beyond just the basic pass rush moves that he has. And I think at 6'6", 253, you see some of the raw ability that he has, but then you just know that there's a ton of potential there that you're going to take this guy in the top 10 and you're not going to look back. And I love his skill set. I think he's a for sure first rounder unless something happens between now and the draft. But I know it's only August 28th, but I think this guy's a first rounder. There's plenty of people that believe that. I know there's plenty of people in the league that know that. So I love his skill set. I think he's certainly one of the biggest names to opt out. And I mean, I've got a couple more we can talk about, but I'll start with Russo and I'll turn it back over to you.
No, I 100% agree. Russo is one of those guys when you're doing your preseason rankings or just preseason watch list, he's a guy that you circle more than once because he has that physical intrigue and he has the production to gain your attention. And like you talked about, he's not this pure, sexy pass rusher yet, but he has those long arms, those physical tools. To be honest, he's kind of built very similarly to Myles Garrett. Of course, he's not as clean as Myles Garrett was, even his freshman year at Texas A&M. I mean, Myles Garrett was one of those guys you saw a senior in high school, and you're like, yeah, this guy's going to be at least a top 5 pick when his time comes in the NFL draft. But Russo, yeah, he cleans up, kind of refines some of his pass rush moves, maybe gets a little smarter as far as reading, certain run concepts or just, knowing when to stay home or rush the pass or going inside, outside. But you can just see him screaming with that intrigue, and the guy is just pin your ears back, go get the quarterback, and he's pretty strong against the run as well. So he's definitely a guy that has that top 10, maybe even higher than that type potential. One guy that catches my eye, it's no stranger to this podcast. We talked about him even though he wasn't eligible a year ago. Rashad Bateman, the wide receiver out of Minnesota. There's not too much this guy can't do. He's a really smart route runner. He sells his routes well. He has that subtle foot quickness where it's not elite like a Rondale Moore out of Purdue, who we may touch into here in just a little bit, but he has enough of those quick feet to come in and out of breaks, to completely turn cornerbacks around. He's great at ball tracking. He can play at all levels of the field, a pretty consistent hands catcher. You're not going to see many drops come his way. He's just a smart overall football player, and anybody you put up against him, I'm taking my money on Bateman every time. Guy, he plays physical. He can play fast. He can play quick. Even though he's listed at 6'1" and 200 and some change, he still carries a lot of that physical edge in his game. And, there was a lot of talk last year about the production and just the potential with Tyler Johnson. But we all knew Rashad Bateman was going to be a guy that we came back to. Here we are now as potentially being, I would say, a top 3 wide receiver in this 2021 class, and maybe even above some of these other guys. It sounds like Jamar Chase, the wide receiver out of LSU, is probably the consensus number 1. Mm-hmm. Then you got the Bama guys, and then you start talking about Bateman being maybe that 3rd or 4th best receiver in this class. But, again, we talked about how good the 2020 NFL draft wide receiver class was. This one has a chance to be pretty special. Bateman's a big reason why.
I cannot agree more. Bateman is a freak. He's my number 2 wide receiver. I love his skill set. I hate seeing him opting out, but I understand why. And obviously with so much of the uncertainty that was happening with the Big Ten, as we talked about earlier, I could understand why he opted out and wanted to get kind of that head start and really keeping himself safe as he prepares for his career. I get it completely. But when you watched him at Minnesota, he just was all over the field. He was so consistent, whether it was as a vertical deep threat down the field or just the ability that he could do with that versatility to play in the slot, the flexibility that he has, and again, just the body control and the tracking ability that he has. You just can't teach it. So I think he is for sure a first rounder. The other guy I was going to talk about was Jay Tufili from USC. I don't know. And I've been having this debate literally in my head all day long because I watched some more of them this morning. And what I was watching this morning, it was like, it wasn't there for me because you have Marvin Wilson, who's a top 5 player in this class. And then you have Jalen Twyman out of Pittsburgh, who is probably a top 25 pick as well. Then you've got Tufili here, he's so talented. He's a former 5-star recruit at 6'3", 315. He had an overall grade from Pro Football Focus at 73.7 this past year, which was down from the year before, like way down. But he's so strong and he's so athletic, but I just think he needs to really sharpen up his overall technique from his hand placement, from his stance. I think there's times that he's far too inconsistent in that regard, but him going in the first round, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. And I think there's plenty of teams that will look at a 21, 22-year-old defensive tackle and say, hey, he's got scheme versatility. I can plug him as a nose, a 1, a 2-eye. I can play him anywhere. And I know that he's going to be stronger than the opposition more times than not. So I think he's going to have a lot of intrigue. I just don't know if he's necessarily a 3-down defensive tackle right now because there was plenty of plays in series against, whether it was Washington or you watched him against BYU, whoever you're watching him against, you'll see him on there for first and second down, and then third down he's taken off. And he only had 5.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. And I know Derek Brown had that same issue, but Derek Brown was a different type of player, and they're not even on the same level. So Tufili does not do that like Derek Brown did. And I struggle with him. I like him in the top 25 of my summer rankings because I think he is one of the better players I've watched. But the more I watch, the more hesitant I get. I don't get more sure of myself, or I don't feel more confident in my evaluation of him. I start to actually have more uncertainty as the more I watch.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what we know he's capable of is incredible because he shows that upper body quickness. He shows that burst off the snap, but he also shows some of that rise in pad level, like you said. He has really good hands, but he doesn't always show them consistently. And I think that's probably why we hold him to such a high standard, because it's like, hey, we've seen you do this against top competition, as in the offensive line of Washington or Utah or, X, Y, and Z across the board. But why are you continuing to struggle, on third down, or not even be on the field on third down? Can you consistently rush the passer? Because as we know, you're not going to be a first-round pick in the NFL as a defensive tackle if you don't have something to show for on third down, which rightly so. 100% agree with that sentiment that the NFL likes to go with. But I do like the versatility here. But when you're comparing them to the likes of Jalen Twyman out of Pittsburgh, like you talked about, Marvin Wilson of Florida State, though these guys can all share very similar athleticism and quickness, Wilson and Twyman show a little bit more versatility as getting to the pocket and penetrating the backfield and really affecting the flow of the play. Tufili doesn't necessarily consistently show that. He shows glimpses of it, but he doesn't consistently show that to be coveted maybe in that top 20. But we get the intrigue. We know the physical skill sets there, and so it's definitely understandable why he is getting some buzz there at least the latter part of the first round. One more guy I'm going to touch on, Caleb Farley, the cornerback out of Virginia Tech. I think he was the first guy to declare for the draft in this 2021 class, but one of the top corners in this class, 6'2", 207 pounds, and you can tell he has that former wide receiver background. He runs the routes the majority of the time for the receiver at playing cornerback, and it's really fun to see because he just has that instinct to turn and look at the ball. He has those ball tracking skills as a cornerback, fairly good ball skills as well, attacks the ball at the highest point, plays physical in both areas against the run and also when the ball's in the air. He wins a lot of those 50-50 battles. He's really clutch in the red zone and the end zone as well. Farley's a guy that has that athleticism. He has that first-round build from a production standpoint, from a consistency standpoint, that could really get into that CB1 type category. I know we were texting I think just last week talking about some of these top corners with Shaun Wade out of Ohio State, Patrick Surtain, the corner out of Alabama. I think Farley can kind of, maybe, I don't say throw down some trump cards in this area, but can definitely be, molded in a vacuum just based on scheme fit, maybe in a press man situation. People may favor Farley a little more than Wade, who functions maybe more as a zone guy or in the slot. Farley, I think, maybe plays more of a diverse role, especially when you're looking for that island corner on the outside. So a lot of intrigue here. If he can stay healthy, tore his knee up in 2017. It was an ACL tear, but showed definitely that improvement the past 2 seasons. So I definitely look forward to seeing how he is ranked among this class, regardless of position.
I'm with you, and I like you said, this is we texted probably a week ago about Wade and Farley and why am I drawing a blank?
Surtain.
Yeah, Patrick Surtain. As we talked about on those guys, it was one of those things that I don't know if we've seen a cornerback trio in the top of a draft so close, because I have on my board, I have Shaun Wade at 11, Patrick Surtain at 13, and Farley at 14. I mean, it's literally neck and neck, and I don't watch corners this early in the process normally. It's not a position that I enjoy all that much to watch, so I normally wait closer to November. But unless it's like one of the top guys or something, I'll probably watch them. But overall, I've watched these 3 guys, and I'm so torn between who truly is the best one, because they rank so close together. And just in the early summer so far, it's been Shaun Wade. But I have my doubts because he's never really played on the outside. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he can play on the outside. He just hasn't had the opportunity to prove it. But I love this group. I love Farley just with the length that he brings at 6'2", 207. Like you mentioned, the fluidity, the body control, what he really brings. I just think he could be a complete package type of corner. And I think a team in the top 15, top 20 of this draft will not hesitate to take him at all. So, yeah, I mean, it's great stuff that you had there over at cover1.net in regards to the update of the COVID tracker, not the COVID tracker, but the opt-out tracker, for the 2021 NFL draft. But let's go into some of the recent players we've watched. We haven't spoke too much on some of the players that we've been scouting. Has there been any players that have kind of stood out to you in recent weeks?
I mean, pretty much I was just, going back and watching these guys. One guy that was on this list, who's kind of the guy that not many know about, is Warren Jackson, the wide receiver out of Colorado State. 6'5", 215 pounds. He plays, 6'6", 215 pounds, and he plays just like it. I mean, I'll read you my description here. His catch radius is a no-brainer when gazing at the 6'6" specimen, has alligator arms to be in contention for any ball on his radar, has the physical skills constantly on display, plays that bully ball and jump ball situations. It may take him a while to reach that peak speed, but he isn't necessarily slow. I would say he probably runs, sub 4.6, and based on that 6'6", 250 pound frame, and he carries it. Like he's a big dude on the outside. He's not slow carrying all that weight. He's not a very gifted athlete as far as short area quickness goes, but he consistently shows some separation. Whether it's some subtle footwork in the intermediate areas of the field, he'll quickly cut inside. But he also just has that extension, and just on one-on-one, just throw the ball his way. He's gonna come in and grab it. So he has pretty reliable hands. Sports Info Solution has a 4% career drop rate, which is, I think, probably near the bottom of the list in a good way if you compare it to last year's wide receiver class. So Warren Jackson, a guy that definitely caught my eye just watching them, just one game. I forget who was it against that I was watching them, but one game, and definitely has me intrigued to watch a little bit more. So Warren Jackson, wide receiver out of Colorado State.
I was going to ask you about him because I saw him on that list, and I wanted to get your take on that. So thanks for answering my question.
There you go.
The guy I got is Eric Stokes Jr. out of Georgia, who I couldn't believe his tape. I talk about the corners, and this is another defensive back that I'm watching, and I think that this guy's got some first-round potential, and I know that sounds crazy. I think he's certainly in that top 50 range for defensive backs and just overall players, But at 6'1", 185, he was a tackling machine this past year. He had 38 tackles. He does not have an interception yet in his career, but he does have 18 pass deflections. So he does get to the ball, and he does show pretty fluid hips. He does show the ability to turn his head and get to the ball and make a play on the ball. I love just how physical he is, though, and what he brings in the run game. And I think he can be an effective blitzer. I think he brings scheme versatility. I think you could put him in the slot, put him out on an island on the outside. I mean, there were times against LSU where certainly, Jamar Chase had his way and Justin Jefferson had his way, but there were also times that he did a really good job getting back to the football and disrupting Jamar Chase and stopping him. So as we talked earlier about Jamar Chase being the top receiver in the draft, Eric Stokes did a pretty good job holding his own for Georgia when he played against LSU. So he's certainly a name to circle back to when you look at defensive backs and just overall defensive players. Another one, and then we'll kind of jump into the final thing that we're talking about, but it's Dylan Rayduns out of North Dakota State. He is really starting to pop. He's really starting to get a lot of buzz. I've got him 15th overall on my board. I think he's a first-round pick. I know Jim Nagy's been all about him, and when we talk about North Dakota State, and as we talked about Big Ten canceling the season, now they might bring it back. And then obviously the Pac-12, they've canceled their season. North Dakota State did the same thing because their conference, the Missouri Valley Conference, MVC, canceled their season. And I think this is obviously a big negative because you have so many talented players. You have Trey Lance, who's a potential first-round pick at quarterback. You've got Dylan Rayduns. You've got Christian Watson. You've got Cordell Volson, their right tackle, who is going to be a plug-and-play guard, I think, at the next level, even though he'll probably be a third- or fourth-round pick, maybe even a fifth-round pick. But I think there was a lot of draftable talent on North Dakota State's roster, but there might not be a safer pick than Dylan Rayduns, who is just nasty, aggressive, looks the part of a future premier left tackle, a guy like almost like a Joe Staley in a sense. And I say it every show, I'm not a pro comp guy, but like I always throw one out there. I think that's something that might stick for Dylan Rayduns, who would be a plug and play left tackle for whoever takes him. I think a first round team is going to take him, but he's got fantastic tape. He's finishing through the whistle. And then, North Dakota State, they don't have a season, but in October they're going to play against Central Arkansas, which will be kind of a showcase game. So that was going to lead me into that final segment that we have. But have you been able to study Dylan Rayduns? I know we've talked about him before. And then obviously, what's your spin on North Dakota State and Central Arkansas in October?
I watched him briefly, but it was only because I was watching Trey Lance. But based on, the feedback I've gotten from you, he has to be atop the list of one of the next guys I have to watch because, not saying, you don't like to give those pro comp, those pro comparisons, but Rayduns with Joe Staley. And, hey, kind of a similar background. I think Staley was a Central Michigan guy, so kind of that small school type situation and coming in to be an all-pro caliber player. So Rayduns, even if he's half of the player Staley is, you're still going to get a solid NFL player. But, no, I'll definitely have to look into watching his film. And just North Dakota State in general, you listed all the prospects they have, and it's unfortunate that they're not going to have the entirety of a season because even though in their historic, program history, they haven't really had this handful of draft prospects, at least to the ranks of what they have this year with Lance and Rayduns leading that pack. But still, they have, 4 to 5 guys that you're going to see come off the board, and maybe 3 of them that are going to come off the board within the first 2 days. And that just says so much about that program. So it is unfortunate we won't get to see them in entirety. But like you said, we will get to see them some point in October against Central Arkansas. So kind of a glorified pro day with a scrimmage, I guess we can call it, because that's pretty much what we're going to get. So we'll whet our appetite, get a last look on some of these guys before potentially some of those college all-star games and, of course, the combine when that comes around. So I'm looking forward to it. It's really cool that they're at least making, some kind of arrangements to not let, 2019 be the last time we looked at these guys, but we'll get one more look to see them in a competitive environment and let them, get one more shot at proving the scouts wrong or right or whatever the case may be. So really cool situation.
Yeah, it is. And you know, the one player that stands out for Central Arkansas, so it's not just, you know, North Dakota State with all the talent. Our good buddy Jordan Reed of the Draft Network, he has actually been really praising the Central Arkansas corner Robert Rochelle. So he's a player that's been through a ton of adversity on and off the field, and he's a guy that has gained a lot of buzz according to Jordan, and he's a guy that has had to overcome not just, you know, again, the problems off the field and the struggles off the field, but he's had to overcome a knee injury. And many people believe that he's a top 100 pick. So he will actually play this Saturday. Believe it or not, if you put on ESPN, you'll get college football this Saturday. Austin, PA against Central Arkansas will be on. I think it's like 8 or 9 o'clock. So it'll be Saturday night. It'll be pretty cool. And you'll get to get kind of a first look at Rochelle, and that'll get you excited for North Dakota State and then in Central Arkansas in October. So I'm pretty excited about all of that. I'm really glad we were able to do this. I don't have anything else. I mean, I think that just pretty much covers it, and we can get into some training camp stuff on Monday like we discussed, and maybe we'll talk about a few more players that we watched over the weekend. But do you have anything else to add for me, CP?
I think that's it, but I'm so glad that we have plans to actually kick off. So that is definitely a breath of fresh air, and it seems like we get more optimistic every single day. And now with the Big Ten, you know, making the announcement to hopefully resume activities some point in November, that's fantastic news. So I'm glad we can continue this podcast and not be doom and gloom, but actually have something to look forward to.
Exactly. So now we can kind of start putting a plan together, start doing that, and start preparing for the next step of the draft process, and that's watching some 2020 tape. So we will do all of that and more, but we will let you guys go off the hook and have a great weekend and all that good stuff. We'll be back Monday. So, of course, you guys can find us on Twitter @_Christian Page, @Russ NFL Draft. Be sure to get the Cover One app, all that good stuff. CP, my man, thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Cover One, the Draft Podcast.